significant impact on the retirement crisis by educating and empowering financial advisors to better serve their clients. This interview is part of the How I Serve series, where we interview top financial advisors who are making a difference in the lives of their clients.
Thanks for downloading this episode of The Resilient Advisor. This episode is part of the How I Serve series, where I interview top financial advisors and they share their story about how they built their business, what they're doing now, and how they serve their clients. Joining me today is my friend Ross Marino, who is the founder and CEO of Transitus Wealth Partners and Advisor 2X. Ross is a serial entrepreneur and a lifelong educator. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Ross, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Jay. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we were joking before the broadcast that Ross and I could just record our regular phone conversations and they would make for great episodes. But let's put some structure on this. Let's talk about your new book and then get into your business. Let's start with a book that you have coming out later this month called Shaping Change. What made you write the book?
Well, I've really lived the whole theme of the book. It's Shaping Change, how to respond when life disrupts your retirement plans. But in my case, it was more of how to respond when life disrupts your plans. And we can go back to when I was 27 years old, which was, well, I guess more than a few years ago. I was studying for the CFP exam. I had moved to Wilmington, North Carolina to open up a financial planning practice. Didn't know anybody in the town, but I knew it was a good town to do financial planning. Within 30 days of getting there, my back locks up after a bad bounce on a trampoline, and I'm now stuck in my house for the next 6 years where I really couldn't go out and network. I couldn't sit, couldn't go meet with clients. And I went through this period where I had a wonderful set of plans of this is how I'm going to build my career and open an office and all of this is going to be great. And then seemingly overnight, everything just gets shattered. The plans were literally worthless. And not only have I lived that, but 30 plus years as a financial planner, any advisor will tell you they've seen clients go through this where they have plans one day, you wake up the next day, and the plan is practically scrapped because now life happened and the plans need to change.
Yeah, Ross, let's go back and unpack some of that because there's a lot there. So 27 years old, you hurt your back. You don't hurt your back. You become debilitated by your back. From age 27 to 33, you're working as a financial planner out of your house without going outside?
Literally in the room over the garage, had to build a practice that way. And this was the late 1990s, early 2000s, which means the internet wasn't really a thing. And I couldn't just put out a web page or market in some different ways. So it was a challenge to say the least. I had to pivot my practice to 401k plans. And one of the main reasons I did that is I realized there was just one place, which was a place of employment for people where I could have a client, but also I could outsource a lot of that. I could bring in enrollment people. I could do some work over the phone. So I did some financial planning, but I also had to pivot because it was really a struggle to create a book or build a book of clients when you couldn't go out and meet with them or play golf or have lunch or even just have normal meetings. The joke on my end is I wanted to have as many phone calls as possible until somebody asked to have a meeting, because then they would learn that they're going to be meeting in my dining room.
All right. So that's your process for 6 years. What changed after 6 years that got you out of the house?
Well, you just learn to live with what your injury is. And it was a back issue. And I learned a lot of what I could do and what I couldn't do. So I couldn't sit much. So when I was in the room over the garage, I literally laid on the floor on a bunch of pillows and I had a floor office as one of the running jokes. But I eventually learned how to work with that so I could get out of the house and got together with a partner. We did a building and open up an office, and I still stand now. I don't sit much. So I wouldn't say that my back is a lot better, but I've certainly learned how to live with it. So that was just 6 years of trial and error and error, which is how we do a lot of things in life, to eventually learn what I can and can't do and learn how to function without having to take painkillers.
And pre-Zoom, pre-YouTube, pre any social media for connecting with people. So that in itself was quite a feat. Did things settle down for you after the age of 33?
Well, I had a plan for things to settle down. It was great. By about age, say 35, I told my wife, I know it's been a rough 10 years. We've been married for 10 plus years at that point. Give me about 5 years. I'll build up the practice and then we can move. We'll get a house. We were working on having a family at that point in time. Thought everything would go well. Well, by the time I hit age 40, my wife and I adopted a couple of daughters. Great experience. But within a year or two, we realized our youngest daughter is actually special needs. And that in itself creates a lot of challenges and a lot of disruptions. And at about the same time, my wife fell ill. She ended up being bedridden for about 12 or 13 years, where most of her life was out of a bed in a room over a garage. So she had some struggles as well. So I all of a sudden found myself being a caregiver to a disabled wife and like a single parent to a special needs child. So I thought the back injury was quite challenging. You never know what life's going to bring you. That stage in life was certainly rough, but the value of that is when you have limited time and limited energy because of family obligations, and this is not unique to me. I've heard this from so many entrepreneurs and financial planners. When you have those types of limitations, you really learn to focus and prioritize and become efficient, because what you have available, your resource allocation to life, is limited. So it really helps you zero in on what you need to do in business. And that's really a bonus.
Your resource allocation in life is limited. I love it, Ross. And I knew that story prior to this interview. It still inspires me every time. You're 6 years working off your floor, then your wife becomes disabled. You guys, I always say you have broad shoulders. You both have broad shoulders. But as you go through something like that, you've also been building businesses. Clearly, you must have learned something through those hard times to still empower you to build these two successful businesses that you have today.
Well, I think the advantage of going through that, it isn't just understanding how to build businesses, but it's the Dan Sullivan principle of who, not what, or who, not how, right? I couldn't do whatever I was thinking of doing. So the only way businesses would grow is if I brought people in who were incentivized and also had a passion to grow those businesses. So I'm like many entrepreneurs. We have a million ideas out there, and one or two of them are actually really good. They could make businesses. But even when you zero in on something that you really think will move an industry or change the marketplace, you have to figure out how to bring in people, and then you have to be able to delegate to them and to trust them and empower them. That is not just a lesson that I learned, but I'd say it's non-negotiable. Because I didn't have the resource allocation, I didn't have the time, I didn't have the mental capacity or the energy, it wasn't optional. So I gave people the opportunity to do that. And for the right people, they love that and they get to build it. So it was no struggle. It wasn't plan B or plan C. It was the only option. And that turned out to be such a bonus because I really became more of a leader or an entrepreneur instead of a micromanager, which, man, I would stink at micromanaging. I'm so bad at it. But it worked out because I just didn't have the capacity to do that, let alone the skill set.
I love Dan Sullivan's concept of who, not how. In fact, that was my favorite book of the fourth quarter last year. Let's tie this back to your book. So based on your life experiences, how can they be found in a new book?
I think what you find as a financial planner for 30 plus years and for what I've experienced in my own life is that life happens and plans change. And if you go to our website, that's the front page. Life happens and plans change, because that's what I learned. And I know that when life changes and plans are disrupted, it's really hard. But you know what's even harder than that? It's trying to make life-altering decisions, some of the most important decisions you will ever make in your life, in the midst of a transition like that. And as financial planners, we're trying to help people as they walk through these life events. And we think in some conversations they're actually hearing us and they're processing it. But in truth, they may not be understanding everything that we say. An example is 2 months ago, I was ready to press approve for the book. Last thing I had to do from the publisher, a couple of edits. This is it. You can approve it. Let's do this. It's sitting in my email inbox. That's on a Monday. By Tuesday night, my wife is in an ambulance going to the hospital because she just had a heart attack. Came out of the blue. arteries are clear. She's in great health. When you look at her, you don't think heart attack risk, you think yoga. So she's one of those people where you know the stories. Everybody said, what? How could she have a heart attack? So instead of sending approve on the book, I'm now sitting in the cardiac ICU, which is a very strange place if you've never been in there. Nobody's awake. There's things beeping. There's machines going on. And there you sit, wondering if you're going to have to go home and tell your daughters, mommy isn't coming home. Now, I don't want to play out this story, but I will tell you that for the next few weeks after that, as my wife was trying to recover and going in and out of the hospital, I was borderline brain dead. You may not have known that if you talked to me. We could have a conversation. It may seem like I actually know what's going on and I'm interacting, but I am in a fog. There are things I forgot. There are things that happened where I didn't just miss part of the conversation. I completely forgot that I had a conversation or I did XYZ. So I just got to live this one more time before we actually publish this book. And as financial planners, how many times have I had a conversation with a client after the death of a spouse or a divorce or something catastrophic that happened in their life and actually think that we can make decisions together? It is, I don't want to say it's unethical. It's just ignorant. I didn't quite understand until I've gone through it so many times how life events can cause you to have limited capacity. And that as financial planners, if a decision isn't important and urgent, we just need to push it off and we'll get to it down the road. That was the basis for the book. Years of actually seeing this. And even just as the book, again, is about to get published, I get one more reminder where I ended up 4 or 5 weeks really in a fog, only working part-time, because it really takes everything you have when you're in a life-altering situation like that.
So as a financial planner yourself, you've sat down with clients that are in that fog themselves. Don't you by defact become a therapist or a unlicensed psychologist a lot of time with your clients?
You know, people often say, gee, Ross, you're like a psychologist. And I'll often laugh and say, I may be like a psychologist in your view, but I'm not a psychologist. I'm not remotely close to a psychologist. The certification I have, which comes from the Financial Transitionist Institute, is a certified financial transitionist. And they don't train you as advisors to be psychologists or even to be, say, a therapist, because we don't prescribe anything. But what it does train you to do is to observe and to understand when people are struggling as they go through transitions. So we want to know, are they clear in how they communicate? Do they understand what we're saying? Or are they a little foggy? Is their focus fractured? Do they lose track of where the conversation is? Or do they maybe focus on one thing that must be done or the world is going to end? And it might seem like a minor thing to the financial planner. So you're trained to actually observe and then understand what someone might be feeling and what they may be going through. And while we're not going to prescribe what they should do, we certainly use that in the financial planning process to make sure we can prioritize and help people understand what they should be doing right now, but also what they shouldn't be doing and what kind of decisions can be pushed off down the road.
Ross, you and I have been in this business a long time. It started out cold calling in a bullpen for me, started out cold calling from a floor in your house for you, but there was never an element of the human side of this business. Do you think that's going to change going forward?
I am so happy that the CFP board just announced that on the 2022 exam, 8% of the questions will be on the psychology of financial planning. Now, mind you, this isn't behavioral finance. I think that's important. I've geeked out on that topic for years. Why people make certain decisions, fear and greed and biases. I think that's fantastic. But to do the psychology behind financial planning, it's going to go a little bit deeper. And if they're making 8% of the questions about that, they just made it a priority. I think it dovetails their changes to their ethics in the financial planning process, where now understanding the client's circumstances becomes that first step in the financial planning process. So I see the industry moving that way. And what I think planners know intuitively, and now hopefully they'll be much more motivated, is that there's always two sides to every decision. If it's financial planning, there's the financial side, there's the human side. It's like two sides of the coin. There is no back without a front or vice versa. They are connected. Which side is more important? Well, I don't know. On a coin, do you think the front of the coin is more important than the back? Kind of sounds like a silly question. That's the way I think we need to approach it. The industry is moving that way. A lot of people are talking about it. I think the challenge is to have tools or protocols to help people understand the human side. That's what the Financial Transitionist Institute does. And I think if we can get that message out there, planners want to help. They understand it. They don't want to be therapists. They're not trying to be Dr. Sue or Dr. Bob, but they understand they have to be able to recognize where someone's at and help them make decisions. Because frankly, many of the people that are in those life events, some of the worst financial decisions they ever made happen. And oftentimes the planner has absolutely no idea because it's someone taking advantage of this person who has diminished capacity because of a life event. So I see it becoming more apparent. The CFP board is obviously bringing it in there, and hopefully we can help get the word out as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of getting the word out, your co-author, Susan Bradley, has been doing that for a while. What do financial advisors who are not familiar with her work need to know?
Go to the Financial Transitionist Institute. Google it, find it, look at it. I found out maybe 3 or 4 years ago about what she did. The quick story is it was 2015. I figured out after everything I've been through in life that helping people make decisions when life happens and plans change is the key to financial planning. Planning for the future is great, but it's unknown. What do we do in the present when life keeps happening and we keep getting a detour? And I embarked on my own education path and was going to create my own firm. And I did at that time, Transitus Wealth. Well, I had a big, long outline of everything that I thought we could do over time. And then one day I find Susan Bradley, Financial Transitionist Institute, and I knew her name. And as I read through the website and everything that they addressed, to me, I looked up and thought, this is the Rosetta Stone to financial planning. This is what I've been looking for years and years and years. It finally helped me understand why clients seem to make decisions sometimes when to everybody around them, it is painfully obvious that's the wrong decision. But why do they do that? Because they're in a transition. Their decision-making ability is compromised. And advisors like me, we didn't really know what to do with that. And sometimes people would make poor decisions. Well, Susan's Institute has been working on this for a long time. When I actually saw the webpage, I went home and told my wife, I got to show you something. I showed her the computer in the front page of it, and she looked at it and said, isn't that what you were going to do? I said, yes, it's transition planning, life event. And then she said, so it's already built. I'm like, right. And being the wife of an entrepreneur, she said, so you don't have to build it? I said, exactly, I don't. Well, you got to call this Susan Bradley. I said, already did. It's great. And the rest is history, as they say. So she's done the work that through my 30 years, at that point, 25 as a financial planner, I knew had to be done. I just didn't know what needed to be done about it. She and a group of a lot of planners literally around the world have created a great body of work, lots of tools, lots of protocols. Advisors should check it out because truly, I believe it's the Rosetta Stone to financial planning.
I was introduced to Susan about 2.5, 3 years ago by Brian Henderson of the Keystone Financial Alliance. And she came on the show. Great episode. This was before we were doing video, and it really, really was informative. I'll put links to that in the show notes to this episode. Let's pivot, Ross. Tell us a little bit about the Transitus process for financial planning, because I've got a feeling it doesn't look like your typical process.
It's a 4-step process, Jay, and 2 of the steps will be familiar to financial planners. It's what we've been trained to do and what most, if not all, do and have been doing their entire career. Here's the 4 steps, and it's 4 questions. The first is, what's going on? The second is, how did you get here? Third, what are you thinking? And fourth, how are you feeling? Now let's unwind those a little bit. What's going on is basically the event or circumstances that motivated a prospect or a client to call in and say, we need to talk. And we want to know what led up to whatever those circumstances are. So question one, what's going on? Question two, how did you get here? If you're retiring, was it planned? Did something change? Was there a health situation where all of a sudden now you have to retire? And not only do we want to know the circumstances around whatever change is going on in their life, we're also going to go back and learn their money story. What influenced your decisions, your beliefs, your habits about how you manage money? Because that's going to be helpful. Then you move on to number three, which is, what decisions are you trying to make? Are you struggling with anything? Are you thinking about anything? Are there any options out there? For someone retiring, they may want to know, when do I take Social Security? How do I replace my income? These are the what are you thinking questions that we have to understand. And then number four, it becomes, what are you feeling? Are you excited? Are you stressed out? This is going to influence the decisions that they make. Now, the planners, myself included, we always did number one, what's going on? We always did number three, what are you thinking? Because that's how we approached prospects and clients. It's great for the financial planning process. But as a financial transitionist, we must add into, how did you get here? What are the circumstances around this change in life? And then how are you feeling? And as I gain insight into that, I'm now in a much better position to help people make a decision that's in their best interest.
Awesome. What a great process. What a way to find a connection with your clients that you wouldn't have if you were just going through the standard 7 steps of the financial planning board's process. Not that you're not doing that, but if that was your outright goal. As we wrap up here, because we are clearly over time, I knew that Ross Marino and Jay Coulter would go over. Tell listeners a little bit about Advisor 2X and how you guys are going to come out of the other side of this pandemic.
We had a conference that I had been planning for years, slated for March of 2020, right when the pandemic started. And for a quick Advisor 2X tutorial, we've been doing conferences and meetings and events for financial advisors since 2010. We've hosted more than 1,000 conferences across the country, some small, 30, 40, 50 people, some multi-day, hundreds and hundreds of people, always for financial advisors. So that's what we do. This is the conference I was waiting to do for years, talking about it for years. And it is the Retirement and Longevity Summit. And the reason we called it Retirement and Longevity is so many people talk about retirement planning. But is that really the goal? I'm pretty sure it's retirement and longevity. It's combining quality of life with financial security. It's understanding the human side and the financial side. We had a great list of speakers. We had a wonderful agenda queued up. Over 300 advisors were already registered. Even though it was a first-year conference, they were coming. People were excited. And of course, we had to pause it, which we did. But in March of 2022, it's on the calendar. It'll be in San Diego. It's the Retirement and Longevity Summit. If you're attracted to or really think it's important to understand the human and the financial aspects of retirement, we'd love to have you join us.
Yeah, your conferences are always top notch. San Diego is a great place to kick off a conference if that's your first one coming out of quarantine. Ross, we appreciate you coming on the show. For podcast listeners, learn more about Ross and his company by visiting transituswealth.com. That is transituswealth.com. Ross, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you having me.